Hello and welcome back to alexgoessailing. In today's episode I'm going to be servicing my outboard. This is a 6 horsepower long shaft Tohatsu, and I've got the brand new service kit for it. As you can see down here, this is the new service kit. We're going to change the gearbox oil, the impeller, anode, seals down there, and then up here we're doing engine oil, spark plug, fuel filter and anything else I can find. Right, so this service kit came with all of the engine oil that I'll need, 10W30 4-stroke. And then we've also got this gear oil, GL4. This stuff has to be squeezed into the actual gearbox. A little bit weird, so you need this additional little connector so you can actually squeeze it in, but I'll show you all of that. And then in this little service kit box, you've got all of these assorted parts, and all labelled and neatly packaged up. So this is fuel filter, also got a spark plug in here, pump case liner, bunch of gaskets, tiny little pin in here, little washer, an anode, another gasket, the water pump impeller, so this will spin around. This is what actually pumps the water around your engine. And then we have water pump guide plate, another guide plate, split pin, and then I think this is just the washer, but it should be nice and easy to fit up. So let's get cracking. Right, the first thing I'm going to do is drain the gearbox oil. That'll make this lower unit much lighter, as it has to separate from this leg here. There's a little connection in here that does all the gear changing. That has to be disconnected, and there's 2 bolts underneath. Right, so I just pulled the drain plug out of here. As you can see, the oil just drips down into there. The oil that came out is pretty clear, so I'm quite happy about that. Another reason why I like undoing this one down here first is because once you've undone the filler up the top, all the oil flows out much faster because air can get in at the top, so you don't get as much oil on your hands when you take off the drain plug. Right, while the oil's still draining out, I pulled off this rubber bung that covers this hole, and I put the outboard in reverse because that lowers these 2 shafts, and I need to disconnect them to be able to remove this lower half here. So now that that one's loose, when we go underneath here, you can see one of the bolts is there, and then there's one bolt around this side which you can see here. Another one pops out. Then so loosening off that connection there allows me to slide it down because you can see where it was sat, and then undoing the bolt that comes in here and here allows me to drop this unit down, and then in here is where your water pump is. This is your main drive shaft, which also spins that impeller to pump water around the outboard, and then you've got your gearbox down here which is still draining. So now this is the only difficult bit really, is taking this bottom unit off completely. So just going to slide out the rest of the way now that we've dropped it down. So you can see the water pump here, that actually has to come off the top of the drive shaft, and you can't do that with it still in this leg. So I'm going to tilt this back and pull it out. And just like that it comes out. You just got to give it a bit of wriggling because it's quite a long shaft. Right, so first off I'm just going to apply a little bit of WD on this, just to make sure, because snapping bolts is the worst. Right, now that we have all 4 of these bolts undone, you've got this rigid aluminium tube which is like a push fit into each end. So this is the slightly tricky bit. You've got to try and just pop it off. So you see what I did there, this tube on the side just pops out, so it just slides, and then you can pull it all the way off, and then what you are left with is the water pump itself. You can see in there the impeller, the housing, you've got the little gasket on top of here, and another little metal plate which you've got to change. You do get a bit of corrosion down here, around here, so I'm going to clean all of that off as well while I'm at it. The intake actually runs down underneath this and in here, so we're going to clean all that out as well. So get a wire brush or something a little less harsh, and we'll give it a good clean over. Like so. You can take that end off, so you can see all the gunk on that. It gets built up, and you can see it all in here. It's like all calcified, watery stuff. This is where all the water runs down through, so I'm going to give that all a nice scrub up. Right, so I've managed to get this very clean now with a combination of blades and some wire brushes. You just don't want to get any dig marks in the top surface of here, because then you might get leaks, which you don't want. Now that I've got this all ready, I'm going to put all of the gaskets on that need to be put on this side, and then I will actually crack into the pump housing and put all those new bits in there. You do have to be careful because you have to match up the holes because they're slightly odd. So I'm going to have to put it on this way around, like so. And then we'll get the next one, which is the metal plate, and again I have to match that going on, like so. And then we can get the other gasket, which is this one here. That's the one with the big hole in it, like so. We have those lined up. We're going to go do the water pump housing next. Right, here we have the pump housing, and here you have the impeller, and then there's the casing, that shiny little metal bit in there, which we're also replacing. But to get this out, I've just got some needle nose pliers, and you can just give it a little tug. Nothing too crazy. Now we've got to try and get this casing out, which is a little bit difficult because it's such a tight fit. I'm going to soak it in WD-40 and see what I can do to get it out, and I'll let you know. What I've done to remove it is, see this lower lip there, that one, it just sits over. So what I've done is put my needle nose inside, and I've squeezed the bottom end, and you can slowly put it up, and then once you give it enough force on that, you can just put it right out. Right, so you can see the brand new housing, nice shiny, and you can see the old housing. That black stuff is silicone. So from the factory, this is the first time this is being changed, because last time I did the impeller, I just did the impeller. But this time around, I'm going to have to use silicone to dab it on the bottom of this, to put on the new one. I'm actually going to apply this with a screwdriver because it'll be a little bit easier, and then we'll squeeze it into the housing. Right, I've applied it around the bottom there. Shouldn't be too much, so it won't squeeze out crazy amounts. It's got a little locating tab, so you just got to be conscious of where that's going. Possibly. There we go. And we push that down, nice fit. And then any that comes out in the middle of that shaft area, you can just wipe off. Right, so the difficulty with putting the water pump back together is, as you can see on this side, you cannot access the top side when you're sliding it down. And on the actual impeller, if you can see, a little divot on the inside, there is a very small pin, this little pin, which has to slide down in behind the shaft and this impeller. So what you have to do is put the impeller on, slide the pin in, and then you've got to slide this down, and as it comes down you've got to squeeze in all of these blades into the actual housing. So let's give it a go and try and stick it together. I've also greased up this impeller a little bit as well, just as it's going to be a dry start with nothing in there. So yeah, let's get cracking. Right, so there you can see that little flat side of the shaft. That's where the pin has to sit in relation to in there. So you've got to do it all at once really, which is a little bit of a pain. So what I'm going to try and do is use my needle nose here to try and guide that in. Too low. Right, so that wasn't too bad actually. Right, now this is the difficult bit. You've got to line up all of these gaskets while twisting in the impeller, which I might try and do with the actual propeller. Twisting the propeller. Right, so that was fairly easy. What I did was just spin the propeller, which spanned the shaft, and I used to use my thumb on the other side to hold the gaskets in place. The other thing I almost missed was getting this lined up and in, because that almost stopped it. But yeah, that's nice and in tight. Now we can actually put the bolts back in and tighten them up. Make sure they're nice and clean when they go in, they haven't got any dirt in it or anything. Try and do them up with your fingers first, just to make sure you're not going through any gaskets or anything. Right, so that's all done up nice and tight, those 4. Now what I'm going to do while I'm down here as well is this anode. This anode's never been changed, so we're going to do that now. I'd had that soaking in WD-40 as well. That's probably the tightest bolt that's on this thing. So we'll zip that off. There's the bolt. That's in very good condition. So let's take this anode off. There it goes flying. We'll stick this one on. Thread it one by hand. Make sure we don't cross thread it. Right, all we've got to do now is reattach this and then we can fill up the oil. Just got to slide it up. There's a little guide inside the actual leg. This is the difficult bit because you've got to line up the gear linkage, which is offset to the side. Just got to wriggle it in. You can actually see it from the access hole as well. You can get your finger in there. Just give it a little twist, walk it on there. And it should just slide up with no real issues. Now the next difficult bit is actually aligning the cut shaft back into the actual engine. So might need to jiggle it around a little bit. Like that. So as you can see, I've got my little gear linkage hooked up. That's pretty flush. And then I can just grab the bolt, put it in this back end. There's the back one done. And then we'll do the one that's hidden underneath here. Alright, that should be just enough. They are aluminium bolts, so they will shear very easily, so just be very careful. Right, I think we'll move inside now since the sun is disappearing. So let's carry on with this. Inside of the leg, you can see the little clamp. Alright, now that I've rotated around, you can see the other shaft. And what you want to do is try and line it up with the marks that are already there from when it was fitted before. But you also want to play with the gear linkage to make sure you can get into all 3 gears. Right, I've now adjusted that in there. So that's nice and tight and correct. So that when I use the gear lever at the top here, you can see it move on the inside. So that's forward. And then click back to neutral. And then reverse. So they all go in quite nicely. So that's good now, and I'll put the little rubber cap back on. Right, so the next stage of the process is filling the gearbox back up. And you have to get this little adapter with the little thread on the end, and that just screws into where the drain plug goes. So all you've got to do is squeeze this in until it comes out of the fill hole. Now when filling the fluid, you want to have this plate flat pretty much. And don't forget to put the washers on the bolts. Right, so I've got this bottom attachment in, so we can start squeezing in the fluid. There you can see it's starting to dribble. Let's get ready for the last final squeeze and get the bolt ready. Do that out quite snugly. I like to stick my finger over it. Grab the fresh one, just to prevent any from coming out that shouldn't come out, and then get the fresh plug hole in. Get that nice and tight. Definitely recommend gloves because this stuff stinks. Now we can turn our attention to the top side of the motor. I'm just going to pop off this cover, and then you have the engine, which is quite tidy since it's so new. You have the spark plug here. You've got the fuel filter. For the oil, this is the filler. It's also got a dipstick in it. Underneath you can see that little neck thing with a bolt in it. That is the oil drain. It's in a little bit of a tricky spot, so I'm trying to rotate the engine around for better access. I've loosened it off and I've got like a little cup here which I can sneak underneath and actually cup right behind it. The tricky bit is actually getting the bolt off, so I'll try and undo that. And you've got to try and push it back in while you're doing it until you can feel the threads pop off. Best try and keep it as clean as possible. So I put my cup right there. That's good. Scrape off the cup, and you can see the oil pouring straight out. Now I'm going to do the spark plug and the fuel filter. So for the spark plug, it should be fairly easy. All you've got to do is pop this cap off, like so. Then you get your socket, you just undo it. Then you can inspect the end of the spark plug, just have a look to see what it's doing. Looks pretty happy, so we'll get the new one. Right, so this is a brand spanking new one. We just got to thread this in and then do it up. So you want it tight enough, you don't want to over tighten it at all. Right, now you've got that in, it's easy as putting the plug back on. So slide it back on. You've got to feel when it clunks into place, you can feel it. Like that. So there you know it's connected up. Next thing on the list to do is this fuel filter. Very easy to change. Just got to pinch that clip and it should come right off. There we go. So get the needle nose in there, give it a push. Bit twisty. Out it comes. Also on the fuel filter there is a little arrow which shows you which way the flow goes. The carb is up here on this side, and then down here is where the fuel comes in. Right, here we have is the new filter. All we've got to do is pop that back on. You want to make sure it goes all the way on. Same for the other side. And then you can just get your needle nose to slide the clips back on. Like that. And then there's this little rubber guard here which went there. That's just to stop the hose line rubbing on the engine. Right, so I have the filter fitted and the spark plug done. So now all that's left to do is put the drain plug back in the bottom of the engine underneath here and fill her up. Right, so I've got the drain plug here and there's a washer that's squashed onto it. You want to change the washer because it crushes down. So there's the old washer and then here's the brand new washer. So just stick that on and then your drain plug's ready to go. And then for this one, you also don't want to do it up crazy tight. You just want to get it just so it's snugged up, nothing too crazy. All we have to do is fit it up here. This little cap will just twist off. Also, make sure the engine is level when you're filling it up and measuring. Right, so we've got our fresh oil and we're just going to pour that in. Try not to spill it down the engine. See how nice and golden that is. Right, that looks to be perfect. Don't know if your camera is going to pick this up, but it's just between the two marks that are on this dipstick. What I'm going to do is I'll run this engine up and get it nice and warm, and then top it up if I need to, and just keep an eye on it. Right, the last thing left to do is grease up the steering joint. There's two nipples, one here and one here. So as you can see, we absolutely gunked the hell out of this. But when it goes milky, that means water's come in contact with it. It should be a tad more clear and golden. But yeah, we'll just wipe all this off. And then this is this outboard finished and serviced. So we'll give it a run up tomorrow. Right, it's the next day and we've got the outboard out here. Just filling up the barrel and I've got the fuel tank. But yeah, let's see if this thing runs and works properly. Right, that's the choke all the way out now, and look at that stream of water. That's what the water pump's pumping through the engine. Pretty strong flow, that's good. We'll try forward gear. This could get very wet. Back to neutral, back to forward, back to neutral, back to reverse. It's just so smooth. Right, now that we've got this outboard all serviced and we know it's not going to blow up when we're on the water next, I'm going to pack all of this up, and that's it for this episode, and I'll see you guys in the next one.